Hello, everyone, and welcome to the SAG-AFTRA podcast. I'm Duncan Crouch-Ireland, National Executive Director and Chief Negotiator of SAG-AFTRA. Today, we're taking a closer look at a part of the industry that can sometimes feel a bit confusing and maybe even frustrating for performers: the casting process. For many actors, self-taping has created new opportunities, but it has also introduced new pressures. Without the immediate feedback of an in-person audition, it can feel like you're sending your work out into a void. Add in tight turnarounds and unclear directions, and it's easy to feel like sometimes no one's on your side. But that is not the case with today's guest. Jenny Ju is a veteran casting director with over 20 years of experience in film and television. She's collaborated with acclaimed directors like Quentin Tarantino, Bong Joon-ho, and Werner Herzog. Her notable credits include Inglourious Basterds, for which she won a Casting Society of America, the CSA, award, as well as Snowpiercer and the Netflix series The Brothers' Son. She brings a deep understanding of what casting directors actually do, what they're looking for, and just how much they actually want actors to succeed. So, Jenny, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. It's good to meet you.
Oh, it's great to meet you too. Let me ask you, what drew you to casting in the first place? Like, how did you connect with your passion for this work?
Yeah, casting really, to me, is like a great kind of puzzle that's half creative and the other half is sort of strategy and politics. So it's not just about, is this actor right for the role, but it's, can we afford her? How do I sell the project to her reps? If she has some kind of scheduling conflict, how do I convince my team to move our dates for her? If we pay her a certain amount, what does that mean for the rest of the cast and what we can afford for the rest of the cast? Once we have her, then it's, okay, back to the creative of who can we put around her and who makes sense to balance out the ensemble. So to me, it's this kind of left brain, right brain, both sides connecting in a beautiful way.
Well, that makes sense. I mean, and I think back, I've worked at SAG-AFTRA for 24 years now. And when I think back on the industry as I saw it when I first started out here versus now, it feels like a lot has changed in the way the industry operates in so many facets. I'm wondering, in terms of casting, like, what do you think has really marked the most change over the last, say, 10 years in the industry?
Oh, obviously, virtual casting has changed things for everyone. The pandemic really forced it on all of us, but it was already headed in that direction. I gave up my office December 2019, so right before lockdown.
That's some kind of timing.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a bit of psychic powers also.
I know, but I gave it up because it seemed like everything I was working on was filming elsewhere. So there were no day players or supporting roles to read in person. And even sometimes for the lead roles, many of those actors were on set, on another set filming, and had to self-tape anyway. So it was already headed there. We were all then forced to say, okay, it's all virtual, it's all self-tape or hybrid. Another thing that has changed a lot is the scope that we're responsible for. Now there's more of an emphasis on global casting, both for streamers and for films and indie films. Our budget margins are so slim that it's really dependent on selling every territory we can or having as many streaming minutes in every territory possible. So if we can find a place for this known Danish actress who's eager to work outside of the Nordic market, that's additive in some way. And let's see if we can make it work. So we're responsible not only for knowing these actors, but consuming more of the TV shows and films that come from these other markets. And personally, I'm spending probably twice or three times as much time just watching film and TV. So that's another aspect that's really changed. And I think it's added to the competition that I think a lot of your members feel.
Yeah, no, I think that, I mean, that really resonates. I will say when we were, doing our preparation for the TV theatrical negotiations in 2023, for example, we did a lot of member meetings and outreach, and our membership is not of one mind about self-tapes. I mean, they are about there being protections against kind of the sort of abusive practices that had developed around some self-tapes, but the concept of having them, some really don't like them, and they really wish that we were back in the days of in-person auditions all the time, and others really do like them and feel like they get more opportunity to be seen. So I think there's a whole mix of different viewpoints about, even within our membership, about self-tapes. But I do wonder, and some have said that there's been a rift that's developed in the relationship between actors and casting. And I'm wondering, first of all, if you agree with that assessment, and if you do, like, what do you think caused it, and what can be done to help repair it?
Yeah, we feel it on our side. We feel the frustration from actors. I think, you can just look at the comment section on a Deadline article about casting or self-tapes and just see all the vitriol from a lot of frustrated actors. And to a large extent, I understand. Short turnaround times, lots of pages, no direction, no feedback. I also think there are some outliers, like you said, for example, like my friend sent me a self-tape instruction for a commercial audition that he got. And the self-tape instructions were just oozing with this attitude of, you should be so lucky to be auditioning for me. And you must do this, you must do that. And if you don't label this properly, the way I've outlined, your tape won't get seen. And I read it and I was just like, no wonder actors hate us right now. Like, this is terrible. I would say those are outliers. Like, most of us are really just trying to do our best and trying to make this process as humane as possible.
It seems to me like one of the things that can help with that is maybe demystifying a little bit what goes on once someone does submit a self-tape, because I think there are people who really question, are the self-tapes they submit necessarily even being watched? I think that's something that really would trigger an actor, is to spend a lot of time really investing in sending in a self-tape and knowing that it does create efficiencies on the casting side, because the logistics of live, even like virtual auditions, are a little different. But the fear that maybe they've done all this work and no one's even looking at it. Can you maybe walk us through like what happens behind the scenes from the casting side, like once a self-tape is submitted?
Well, even before a self-tape is submitted, when we're just getting submissions from reps, I usually try to look at an actor's demo material, because sometimes I can rule them out based on that. We're looking for something very specific. So if I look at the demo material and it's not what we're looking for, they're not the right type or look that we're going for, I can usually just narrow it down so that we don't waste an actor's time. We don't waste my team's time in making the request. But once we have those out and the tapes start coming in, my team uploads them to our viewing platform and logs them on a shared grid that we have in our office and marks them as viewed for me. I will usually watch tapes either at lunchtime or in the evenings or on weekends, because I just want uninterrupted time to where I don't have to answer phone calls or emails. And I make notes on every tape. For the ones that I want to call back, I'll move them to a callback section so my team knows to schedule that. In my office, for me, I usually do a Zoom callback with actors before any tapes go to producers. It gives me an opportunity to make sure that they can take direction, to tweak things, to find certain beats that I know we need in a scene, so that the tape that goes to producers is a little bit more polished. And from there, if we need a producer session, we'll go ahead and run through that. We'll usually do what we call it like a tech run through, which is the day before the Zoom session with producers. We'll have the actors come in just with me and my associate and my casting assistant, and we'll make sure the framing's right, the connection's strong, the lighting is good, all of that. I'll usually kind of give some heads up about what to expect for the next day. So these are the producers that are going to be in the room. This is who's probably going to give the direction and notes. If you don't understand a note, please speak up and ask. Please take water if you need it. That's something that like is so small, but a lot of actors don't think about. Can I take a sip of water? Yes, please. And in my mind, I'm hoping that that eliminates kind of the unknown of the next day.
Well, I think having that understanding is extremely helpful to people, just because it does feel a little bit like magic what's going on behind the scenes there, and knowing what that process is helpful in making that more accessible. Do you think that it is a problem with self-tapes not being watched by casting? Because I've heard actors describe it as like sending tapes into a black hole or whatever. I mean, how would you respond to that generally on behalf of casting people in terms of the practices there?
Again, I can understand why there's that feeling. What I'll say about it is I need to watch every tape because I don't know which one is going to be the one. So why would I not watch one of them? Like part of the grid that I have in my office, we log every self-tape request. So if there's people who we've requested that we haven't received yet, we follow up once. We'll put the date of when we followed up. We'll follow up again. We'll put the date of when we followed up again. We need your tape. And every time I'm watching tape and I'm about to press play, in my head, I'm honestly thinking, is this the one? You know, is this her? Did we find her? Like, come on. I'm rooting for it to be the one. So not watching a single tape that comes in, like you could be missing that gem.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Sort of when you talk about that and you find the one, so you're looking, at so many tapes and looking at so many sources even, and you found the person who you think is just exactly the right fit. How actively do you push with, say, producers, directors, others for that person that you think is the right fit? Or is it more like I'm presenting a range of options? Or like, do you get really involved in pushing for the person that you think is really the right fit for that role?
Yeah. I've died on many hills. This work for us is really personal. Just like you said, it's personal for actors. We're working longer hours than we ever have because we're really squeezed for time. We used to get 10 weeks to cast a movie. Now we get 6. So our scope is wider and we're considering more actors for each role. And we're never really turning our casting brains off because of that. Like we're working weekends and nights. And so you can't help but get personally and really emotionally invested. And, you've also helped these actors through, in some cases with me, it's 5 auditions by the time you're sending that tape to the studio for consideration. So knowing how much time I've spent with those actors, cultivating them, knowing, okay, I know this is the right one, but also realizing that the executive or, the studio is really only going to consider 2 minutes of their tape or maybe 5 minutes, depending on how long the scenes are. That's really where the impassioned pleas come in. And that's where we have an opportunity to advocate for the ones that we really think are the ones who are going to elevate the project.
Well, that sounds like that would be really like if you're the person who's been singled out, by Jenny Ju as the right fit for this role, that's a good place to be because it sounds like you've got a advocate in your corner. Then you may not even know it yet, probably, right? Because you're having that conversation before they really know.
I hope they know it. I mean, there's been times where I just keep asking for more and more stuff. Like, can you redo your slate? Because it's not really giving what I want it to give, And I know these executives are just watching. Like, I've spent 7 hours with you by the time we're done with a mix and match session and those tapes are getting sent over to the studio. they're spending 5 minutes watching you. That 5 minutes has to convey what I want it to convey. So, I ask a lot of actors. So by the time they're in it with me and I'm advocating for them, it gets really personal. I'm really emotionally invested, and I get nervous, actually. Like, the most nervous I ever was advocating for an actor on a Zoom after like a 3-month casting process, and being very nervous about what the executives were going to say. The most nervous I've ever been in my professional life, and maybe even my personal life. My voice was cracking, my hands were shaking. It was intense.
Did it work out? Did the person you were pushing for?
It did.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Yeah.
No. So basically, if you're an actor and you're hearing from you and you're asking for more stuff, like, that's a good sign, actually, because that means that you are wanting to make sure you've got the best possible piece, to put in front of executives or directors or whoever.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the flip side of that, is that there's a lot that I ask of actors who don't get the role. So as happy as I am for the person who books it, there are people who went through that journey with me who didn't get it. And I hope that they do understand that I was really hoping that they would be the one as well.
Yeah. So when you're an actor doing a self-tape like that, what do you think is like something that trips up actors the most? Or if you could identify one thing that actors should know that'll help them deliver the best possible self-tape, what would that be?
I don't think there's any like one thing. I listened to the last episode of this podcast with Rob Brownstein, and I fully agree with everything he said on self-taping and the process and the attitude that you should have going into it. It was a great episode, and I hope all your members get a chance to listen to that one too.
Well, that is one of the greatest plugs we've had for the podcast from a guest, unprompted, unsolicited, and unpaid. So thank you, Jenny. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think all of your members at this point are kind of aware of the best practices for doing a self-tape. I think when it comes to day players or co-stars, don't try to do too much with it. It might only be a couple lines, but the most work you should put into it is researching the show, researching the director you're auditioning for. Try to be in line with that tone. Try to be in line with the tone of the project. Don't try to stand out or, amongst the other auditions, unless the scene really calls for it. I don't work on a lot of comedy necessarily. I think that comedy is a little bit different. But for a lot of these scenes, when it's just a couple lines, I need you to be listening, and I need you to throw those lines away. Like, that's, for me, some of the hardest roles to cast are just the 1- and 2-liners.
Yeah, I can imagine. So then, still thinking along this line of thought with the self-tapes, if an actor is working on their self-tape and they realize that something about it is confusing, like something about the instructions don't make sense to them, or what's being asked, or for whatever reason they need more time, should they reach out? And if so, like, what's the best way to handle that? How
Yes.
can you reach back?
Yes. Always reach out. Always ask questions. There's not a single time where we wouldn't answer a rep's question. On our self-tape instructions, we have my associate casting director and casting assistant emails on there, specifically in case actors have questions. And it's kind of surprising how few people take advantage of that, to be honest.
Maybe they think they'll be annoying you or something if they bother you with a question, or maybe they think the question's going to be perceived as not a good question. You know what I mean? Like, I wonder if that could be part of it.
Yeah, maybe. I guess, well, I'll put it out here right now. If you get a self-tape request from me and you have a question, the emails are on there, please.
And you're welcome to
use
it for your question. Okay.
Yeah.
couldn't be clearer than that.
I have heard that some offices like just aren't as responsive to questions. And in those cases, my suggestion would be, okay, do one take how you think they want it, like your best guess on how you think they want it. And that'll be take one. And do another take with a different interpretation or intention, but label it take two angrier. So if the answer was, yes, we want this hot and angry, then casting knows, okay, take two is going to be that. Like when they're looking at your takes, they know right away, okay, we know he did it angrier and that's what we're looking for. If you need more time, always ask. Sometimes the answer is no. And then if in your heart, you know you're not going to do well because of the short time frame, maybe ask, okay, can I just do one scene instead of two? Because that's all I can handle right now. And if they like what they see in scene one, then I'll do scene two when I have more time. Or if it's 8 pages, ask, can I just do the first 4 to give you like a little bit of my interpretation of this? And if you like it, then I'll do the other 4. If they still say no and you have to pass, they might give you another opportunity if they can't find what they're looking for. And if they don't, it wasn't meant to be. On to the next.
Gotcha. So let's pivot a little bit, if that's all right, and let's talk about headshots. Something I find endlessly confusing, so I can't wait for you to clear this up for me, which is, well, I'm a lawyer by training. And so whenever I see headshots, I kind of feel like I know a great one when I see it, but I'm not exactly sure why. So it reminds me of that Supreme Court case where Potter Stewart's famous statement, "I know it when I see it." In that case, talking about obscenity. So I'm hoping you can help me understand like what matters, first of all, to you as a casting director when you're looking at a headshot, and what makes a great headshot versus one that does not help you achieve your goals.
Yeah, personally, I just want it to look like you. For what I normally cast, I need more naturalistic photos. Oftentimes, I'll even ask for natural light selfies, and I'll also send that to my creative teams, just because oftentimes the headshot is like a little too frosted or airbrushed. And I want people to know what these actors really look like. I know that's not the preference for all casting. I know for commercials, they need a different look or style. But I would also just say, when you polish too much, or if you airbrush too much, or if you filter too much, you're also kind of filtering what makes you distinctive. So be wary of that. For kids, though, those photos need to be updated every 6 months, maybe a year. And I say photos, not headshots, because these days with a smartphone, I think most people in casting would prefer a recent portrait mode smartphone photo taken at home versus that professional headshot you had taken that's 2 years old and you don't even look like that anymore. Because kids are changing all the time. And we're often looking for a certain look. We're sometimes looking for a younger version of one of our lead actors. So look is really important. Age is really important. Those need to be updated all the time. I would also just like to add for kids, demo reels. I know those parents are sending every clip to grandma and grandpa. Like, you need to put those together on the reel. If you're a working young performer who's got 6 years of great experience and your reel is still from when you were 3 or 4 years old, that's way outdated, that doesn't help anybody. That doesn't help us in casting. That doesn't help the performer. I mean, parents have so many photos of their kids in their phone. I would much rather have one, of them smiling with their soccer trophy that's from last week than one that's from 2 years ago.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I have to say, for me, I would be a little intimidated by the idea of having to submit a selfie, but maybe, Then again, I'm not an actor, so maybe that resonates good with them. So if there was one, and I know I keep asking you to pick one, so if it's more than one, that's fine too. But I was just thinking, if there's like one big misconception that you find actors have about casting, what would that be?
Just one. Wow.
Or one or more big misconceptions, especially if you want to clear them up for us right now while we've got you on the line.
Yeah, just give me the laundry list, Duncan. What have you heard? No. I think the one that frustrates me the most is the thought that a lot of actors have that the transition to virtual casting has made our jobs easier, has made casting easier, or that we're lazy because we're not in the room with actors. I think that's so frustrating because my team works so hard. I work so hard. So many of my colleagues work so hard. And it's been hard for us to transition to this. Those of us who grew up solely being in the room, that was a very joyous time. We had a lot of time to cast a project. We had time to take lunch meetings. These days, we're glued to our computers from 8:30 to 8:30. I think that's one thing that frustrates me. We're really just trying to do our best in this new normal, and we're trying to make the casting process as respectful as possible. We miss being in the room, but the reality really is like we're not going back to that. I think the best case scenario is a hybrid situation or a mix of like Zoom auditions and self-tape, and also if it's more final studio test or screen test, kind of in person or mix and match in person. But I have to beg productions for $50 a week kit rental for my associate casting director and my casting assistant. They're not going to say, okay, we'll give you $3,000 a month for an office, especially now that I have to say, like, my colleagues and I have proven that our work, our output doesn't suffer because of this. It just means longer hours for us, but we're willing to do it because we don't want the work to suffer. So all that said, I'm always open to ideas on how the process can be improved and how things can be improved.
Well, I really appreciate that. And I know that our podcast listeners will too. One area where I find there's a lot of sort of common ground with everyone who's a creative participant in the process of creating motion pictures, television, everything that our industry does. I've been aware of and seen outputs from some AI tools that purport to use data analytics to reframe the casting discussion. These AI models bring together things like box office and things like this is for sort of established artists who are going to be part of the main cast of a project and viewed as driving the success of the project. And I guess, my immediate reaction to it was it feels like this is really hitting right at the heart of the artistic contribution that casting directors are making into these projects. And I don't see how an algorithm can really do that. I guess I'm wondering, are you feeling pressure from these kinds of tools and things as well, from a point of view of a veteran casting director? Or do the producers understand that these things can't accomplish that? Or where is that? Because I know a lot about what's going on with actors, but I don't know as much about what's going on with casting directors in this space.
Yeah, I think AI just generally, is such an unknown for so many of us, regardless of what field you're in. So I think there's always a fear of, are we going to be replaced? How is this going to affect my job? I've been through so many iterations of how projects get financed and greenlit. A lot of studios, a lot of production companies, a lot of foreign sales companies that sell projects at markets like Cannes and Sundance. When you're putting together those puzzles, they have their own numbers on what the value is on these actors. And if there's one thing I've learned in 24 years of casting, it's don't argue with those sales numbers, because you're not going to win. Like, they have their numbers that make sense to them. So for me, I look at those things as like, how can I work within that? Netflix has their own algorithm of who's valuable to them, and it works for them. And that's great. And actually, some of those actors who star in their shows can then go greenlight a $10 million movie on the platform. And they probably wouldn't be able to do that on another streamer or in a traditional foreign sales market. So I'm worried about the lack of creativity involved if you just plug something into AI and see what it spits out. But at the same time, I think we've already been working with these algorithms and these kind of sets of data that studios and foreign sales companies have. So I'm just going to see where it goes.
Well, speaking for myself, I certainly hope that it doesn't go in a direction that removes the kind of, we talked a little bit before about kind of the magic of the process. And I mean, I'm sure every one of us can think of movies and TV series where maybe some out of the box casting decision just turned something from something that would have been great to something that was extraordinary. And so, hopefully that part of the human creative process will remain strong, because it feels like that collaboration amongst all of the creative participants, whether it's writers, directors, actors, casting directors, others, that's what kind of, when you see a really special project that when it's completed and you see that, how that just worked, there's something magical there.
On Snowpiercer, director Bong and Tilda Swinton were friends, but there wasn't really a role written for her. So we pitched director Bong, could she play this role that was written for a man? And he loved the idea. And we actually didn't change anything. Like, her character is referred to as Sir at one point in the movie. And I love that. So yeah, to your point, like, I don't know if machine learning would understand that there is that area to collaborate in a creative way to elevate a project. So
what a great example. Right. Thank you for sharing that. That's really terrific. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm afraid we are out of time, but this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you for being willing to be so upfront and, candid with our listeners, with our members. I think that they really appreciate that. I know I appreciate it, because having that insight helps demystify things and helps better understand how our members can engage with casting. And that's one of the most important engagements. I mean, since so much of the job of being an actor is finding the work, really understanding how casting works and how you can be effective.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And, I mean it. I'm always open to how things can be improved in my office and how we can make things more respectful. So if there's anybody listening who's auditioned for me before and has some comments, like, I'm open to hearing it.
That's wonderful. Well, that's great. And I bet they will take you up on that. So this has been a conversation with casting director Jenny Du. And thanks again, Jenny. Really appreciate it. And to all of our listeners, we will catch you on the next episode of the SAG-AFTRA podcast. The SAG-AFTRA podcast is produced and edited by Aaron Goddard and John Small. Supervising producers are Pamela Greenwald, Shira Reich, and Michael McNulty, with production and marketing support from Damon Romine, Jalika Conte, Delaney Howard, Margot Giordano, Joe Mulgado, May Wong. The podcast is hosted by yours truly, Duncan Crabtree Ireland.